This is the 25th anniversary year of the founding of Barnabas Group in Orange County. This morning we have the co-founders of Barnabas Group, Bob Shank and Jim West, who are going to join us. And just in conversation with Marianne, tell us about those early days. This meeting this morning is a small part of the legacy of the founding of Barnabas Group 25 years ago, and it's just really exciting to have them here. 2 years ago, Bob Shank was fighting acute leukemia. Jim West was fighting stage 4 cancer, and God delivered both of these men through that.
What an honor to be with these two gentlemen and for all of us to be able to hear more about the legacy that went into creating this meeting that we're at today. And so I'm going to start by asking Jim a question. What was the primary reason for launching the Barnabas Group 25 years ago?
Well, Bob and I went to lunch, and Bob asked me if I wanted to help him start something called the Barnabas Group, and I asked him, what is it? And he says, well, I'm not too sure. And I said, wow, how much does it pay? How many hours do I have to work? So that was how the Barnabas Group took off. But I had just graduated from the very first class of the master's program, and Bob taught us many, many things. But one of the things he talked about a lot was that, we're going to enter that second half of our life, and how are we going to use our time, our talent, our network, and our treasure to bless and empower, kingdom improvement. And so we decided, we'll get together a bunch of Barnabas Group or master's program graduates, and we'll do two things. Well, with their business acumen, they'll come alongside these ministries and help them. And the other thing is that they'll become better friends, they'll find out they've got like-minded passions, and they'll take off and do things together. And both those happen. Bob?
Great leadership happens when vision and strategy are stirred together. I was vision, Jim was strategy, and 25 years later, God was in it. But let me... gratefully this isn't being recorded. We were putting 60 master's program graduates out of our pipeline and into their future. And as we looked at what would happen likely, they were going to go back to their churches and say, I'm now a graduate of the master's program. And they would have said, great, you're still a third grade Sunday school teacher. Or they could have gone back to ministries that they were already supporting and say, I'm now more clear about my kingdom calling. How can you use me? And they would have given them an envelope. Because the faith community is not in a position historically to value leadership that's coming out of the marketplace rather than out of seminary. And the remembrance that the faith launched in the first century as an outlier from the Jewish community, and the faith movement for thousands of years had been driven by the Levites, a particular tribe within the Jewish community, who were the professional ministry people. Jesus got 12 guys together, not one of whom was a Levite, and said, we're starting something new. And they were all bivocational in the early days. And so we just recognized that having an opportunity to bring marketplace men and women who recognize that their leadership by God's design was already in play and being sophisticated and effective in the marketplace for profit lives, but had potential to be engaged in advancing the kingdom. Well, what we did was to form a union. Go to a church or a parachurch all by yourself and say, I'm here to make a significant contribution. And you can be sort of overlooked. But if you present a room full of clearly high potential men and women who have capacity for the kingdom that has yet to be fully realized, the game changes when, instead of you being in the room as the minority partner and viewed as a checkbook with legs. Wait for it, wait for it. You know, that's why they get people to drink before they tell them the jokes. You're always funnier. You are more than a checkbook with legs. God's leadership manifested through you for Barnabas. He sold a piece of property, brought the proceeds, and laid it at the apostles' feet. And from that point forward, his leadership is no longer expressed in his financial stewardship. It's expressed in his incredible ability to bring new leaders under his wing. Men like the Apostle Paul, men like John Mark, those who benefited from what he brought from his marketplace life.
Thank you. Well, being able to bring a group like this, people with talents and skills, and help them to live out that kingdom calling, it can kind of be hard to get them in the room at one time. So, Jim, can you give us some insight? How'd you come up with the quarterly meeting or the format that we have?
I wish I could tell you that we had a business plan that we thought through and did a lot of research on, but we didn't. We just started meeting, and first couple of years, probably first 3 or 4 years, we had 4 morning meetings, and we found out we didn't get a lot of spouses that would come to those meetings. So we tried an evening meeting, and people brought their spouses, and they turned out to be more social. We found out that the morning meetings tend to be what I call a working meeting. More people would sign up to help ministries and come alongside ministries at the morning meetings. The evening meetings were a lot more social, but a lot more networking between the people that were there, and they got things done. Stuff was happening with ministries through both meetings. We said, yeah, that's great, so we did that. A couple of years, we actually tried 5 meetings. We tried a lot of things. A lot of things worked, and several things didn't. The things that didn't, we stopped doing. So Barnabas Group is where it's at today, and I know Andy and the others are still, trying different things, and it's exciting to see what they're doing and the improvements they're making.
Which is one big reason we want you to take the survey, to be strategic. All right. Reflecting on the last quarter of the century, what achievements or milestones are you most proud of? And we'll start with Bob.
I'm grateful that we have no ability to calculate the net effect of what the Barnabas Group community has been responsible for. There's a temptation to create, count, and control. There's a real temptation to take credit for things that you can measure. And I'm grateful for the fact that we've never had a closed hand and a feeling that unless we're in control of it and can measure it and can take credit for it, we're not going to let it in the room. This has been about letting people who ought to know one another have an environment where those relationships can be hatched, can be grown, can be encouraged. And as we get anecdotal information from people who say, man, I met these folks at the Barnabas Group, and they begin to describe outcomes that we never knew existed. But we'll find out later because we've got a few million years to catch up on everything that's happened because of men and women like you who have created an opportunity to be who God made you to be, and you've proven already from your marketplace lives, and putting that into action in the things that will matter forever.
I can think of 2 things, and luckily I had this question, so I knew what was going to be asked, but I'll tell you 2 short stories. When we first started the Barnabas Group, it was $1,500 to be a part of the Barnabas Group with an additional $1,000 that we put in a joint NCF account where people would actually call me and say, I want to donate $50 here or $100 there. And believe me, we started out with 8 accounts. Over 9 years, we grew to about 106, so it grew up over the time. By the time it got to 106, that was a mess for me. I was a nightmare. Thank goodness we got rid of that, and everybody has their own individual accounts now. But I went back with NCF's help, and we looked at how much money was given from those accounts that started at 8 and went to, their $1,000 that went to 106. Some people put in more. Over that 9-year period to Barnabas Group ministries they'd met at the Barnabas Group. Think of a number. What do you think that number was? You don't need to shout it out, but just think about that number. I'm willing to bet that you have a low number. It was $38 million. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, and this is actually a bigger thing to me, is in 2015, we did a survey. And in that survey, we surveyed 79 people. And we had some folks from the business school at Pepperdine actually do the survey. They called people, they talked to people. But one of the questions, the question I most cared about was, has being part of the Barnabas group caused you and allowed you to walk closer to the Lord? And I would have been happy with, 25%. That would have been a great outcome for me. 77 of the 79 people answered positively. That's 97%.
That's so great.
That's awesome. Well, you have, over this 25 years, heard and interacted with so many stories and ministries. Can you share one that might come to mind that is a real highlight or game changer for you?
Our next presenting ministry is the Free Wheelchair Mission. In the earliest days of the Barnabas Group in Orange County, Don Schoendorfer brought his version 1 free wheelchair into that meeting. And Don was an accomplished inventor with a great background in terms of creating medical devices and other life-impacting innovations. But when Don brought the wheelchair in, he said, folks, I know there's a need, and I've done what God gifted me to do, but for us to be able to realize what I think he has for us to do requires gifting that I do not have. And it was like a mob scene, the expertise that Don needed to get the Free Wheelchair Mission launched and underway, and you'll hear from Nuka in a few minutes about that. Don has, in his quiet moments, reflected after that to say that had it not been for the Barnabas Group, I don't think the Free Wheelchair Mission would have ever come to life.
Well, I can keep you here till midnight telling you stories about how Barnabas Group people have gotten involved with ministries and how it's blessed not only the ministry but the Barnabas Group partner. Lots and lots of stories. Well, I'll tell you one that's just personal to me. Is that I wanted to know how could I get closer to the Lord. And so I took a step when Harbor Ministry came and presented, and they asked us to come to their retreat. And so and they don't tell you what's going on. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag today and tell you what it is. But I went back to Colorado and then down here to Coronado for the second year. And what they try to do is get you to spend time with the Lord. Novel idea to get closer to him. 8 hours one day a month is what they're looking for. Well, I do it on Saturdays and about 2-3 hours every Saturday. And I did that for several years. When I found out I had cancer, I can tell you that time was well spent. So that's a personal story. I'm also involved with NCF. I'm on their board along with Bob, and that's a huge blessing. I'm on the board for Salem Christian Homes. So I've gotten involved. I've met many, many ministries that personally I've been blessed with, as I'm sure you will be as you get involved.
Thank you. Just takes my breath away to hear the impact and the ripple effect that these two gentlemen sitting down at a breakfast and talking about this and saying, well, I don't know where to start, but let's go. They got engaged, and God used it in such amazing ways. We just have a couple minutes to close this out, and what I'd like to ask is, what's the biggest takeaway for you for creating the Barnabas Group or being a part of the launching of it?
Biblical math works this way. God adds and then orders us to multiply. God doesn't multiply. That's our order. Well, when we bring the Barnabas Group together, we are delighted to add members, add partners, add more men and women and their giftedness. But let me tell you what happens because of that. When you get added into this mix, the ability to multiply in the things that will last forever is unleashed. And so what I love to watch is the multiplication that occurs. You cannot multiply alone. God did not create Adam by himself and then say, be fruitful and multiply. He added Eve, and then he ordered them to multiply. And if you're trying to do kingdom things all by yourself, you're a fool. God never intended that our best kingdom work would be done alone in isolation. God adds, and then he orders us to multiply. I'll just tell you this. If there's a better place for you to put your time and money than the Barnabas Group for you to multiply your kingdom impact, I don't know where it exists. And no one in the room is better traveled with regard to what's available in the kingdom than I am. So if you want to argue that one, come spend 5 minutes with me afterwards. You'll lose. And then I'll tell you that if you don't take advantage of a multiplying environment like this, you will be picking up dishes from our tables in eternity. The first here will be last there. The last here will be first there. What you do here today matters to you forever. You're a fool if you don't take advantage of an opportunity like this.
Boy, hard to follow Bob. Okay, I would tell you this, that my biggest blessing by far in the Barnabas Group is the people I've met. I've had access to meet people I would have never met had I stayed in the mortgage industry. And I thought about staying in the mortgage industry because right when we started the Barnabas Group, the second biggest refi boom in history had started at that time. And boy, I begged God, could I go back in the mortgage business and just make some money and I'll give you half of it? But he didn't actually need half of it, so he kept me here. But I've met several friends. I can look around here, and Jim Peavy and Bill Carson, we hiked together. Or hopefully we're going to hike with Bill, and Dick Leonard and Pasquale Russo, Dan Platt. I could name tons of people that are dear friends I'd have never met if I hadn't been with the Barnabas Group. Same in Orange County. Connie Salio says the same. He says, when you sit down at a Barnabas Group meeting, you sit down next to someone you may not know, but they are like-minded, and you might find out that's your new best friend, and you're going to go off and take off and do ministry together. So it's going to be the people you meet in this group.
Thank you. What a wonderful note to conclude our interaction. And let's give them a round of applause.